Welcome to Empowering Humility, where we're on a mission to promote human flourishing by restoring humility as a common denominator in society today. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome to the Empowering Humility podcast. Today is episode number 1, and I am so excited to be talking to the illustrious Giancarlo Newsome, who is the founder of Empowering Humility. And I would just love to hear so much of your background, why you're so passionate about humility, what problems you might be seeing in the world as it relates to hubris or arrogance or pride in contrast to humility, and what you think maybe the solution is. And so that's what we're going to cover in our first episode, the first of several that are coming out. And before we get started with this conversation, I would love for listeners out there to join this movement. So if you are passionate about what you're seeing in the world as far as civil discourse, that's one of the topics we're going to talk about at some point, politics, the way that people treat each other, kindness, and all these different dynamics, especially as it relates to leadership, teamwork in the workplace, and just so many other topics. If that is something that you're passionate about, we would love for you to go to empoweringHumility.com, join our newsletter, see our content, share it with your friends, and just get involved with this movement. And it's something that I know Giancarlo and your team so passionate about. It's something I'm also care a lot about, especially as it relates to civility and kindness and respect. And so anyway, so that's my preamble as we start episode 1. But Giancarlo, welcome to the show, and please give the folks a little bit of background. Who are you? Who is Giancarlo, and why should we care?
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Well, I should say no one should care. If I'm part of this team that's empowering humility, I don't matter. I do matter, but I don't matter, if that makes sense. And I think we were talking earlier about, most of us, there's no shortage of self-help books, right? But what if we need more self-help without the self? You kind of look at, I'm just a guy just like you, and who's got some tragic life stories that when you peel that onion, you look back and you go, a lot of those tragic and relational stories, most of our pain is tied to some form of broken relationship that most of the time it could have been prevented with shared humility. And as I've been, and this is, they say a lot of trauma takes, 2 to 4 years to get through. But, my particular baseline story was about 10 years ago. And, but also as we step back and kind of look beyond ourselves, you look at kind of what's going on in society. You have 42% of our high schoolers have a consistent now state of sadness or hopelessness. The America was founded on some pretty awesome dreams and hopes, and clearly we've lost our way. And again, I helped found Empowering Humility, I think is a better way to state it. There's so many other people that are behind it. So that's a little bit about me. We feel that, in a nutshell, most people kind of recognize like that, we'll go with very direct examples of where we know there's like unhealthy outcomes and people who profiteer off of encouraging or unhealthy behaviors. And a well-known one is called Pornhub. But one that's a lot, as they appeal to lust and sexual behaviors that are known to be degrading, there's a whole bunch of other vices that just don't capture pop culture in terms of being problematic. So as Pornhub is bad for, like sexual relationships, Facebook and those algorithms and what it makes money off is bad for other type of vices like envy. So and again, or greed, or pride, or bias. And it's, there's great documentaries like The Social Dilemma that's
Hmm.
quantify just how much these algorithms are reinforcing our biases. Sometimes it's for good, right? But sometimes it's for bad. And it's, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think most people transition from a state of humility, a state of pain, or a state of good. They become so kind of involved in it that then they go to the extremes. And there's hardly a person I meet, and I bet you too, Brandon, that acknowledges that extremes are bad. And how do we stay away from the extremes? Humility. And that's so our premise with empowering humility. We've got so much technology now that reinforces negative human behaviors. Can we build some technology that reinforces at least one that we feel is kind of a baseline standard for good relationships and good mental health? And it's in the statistics, the science has long proven that humility is mentally, physically, spiritually a healthy virtue to cultivate. So that's empowering humility. If I wasn't clear, feel free to ask some questions.
Yeah, yeah. No, what comes to mind is a quote. It's a C.S. Lewis quote, and I think this is on your website, but it's the idea that it's not about thinking less of ourselves, but about thinking of ourselves less, which is a really beautiful, elegant way to say it's not just that we should not consider ourselves in high regard or have self respect or just think, just love ourselves and care for ourselves and have self care and boundaries and all that. It's not that. It's that sometimes we can overdo the importance that we have on ourselves. And if I could maybe tease out what you're saying a little bit, that if you're on some of these social platforms like a Facebook or Instagram or even Twitter, or I would say even LinkedIn,
Yeah.
you name it, any of those platforms, it makes you feel as if you're A, the center of the universe, like I have something to say, and B, it makes other people's highlight reels are that's one of the quotes that people show their highlight reels on Instagram and Facebook and all that. I went on this trip, I had this promotion, I drive this car, whatever, and it makes us as users on those platforms think less of ourselves, and that we don't measure up, or that you start having that envy or that greed or that that whatever. So it's that. Is that right? Am I capturing that well? That it's kind of this dual flaw in what is social media these days, typically.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some of the folks that practically speaking, that helped me get through a pretty tough period was exactly that. They never encouraged me to think less of myself, right? They just said, just don't think so much on yourself.
Yeah.
And so they encouraged me, one, to give things to God a bigger power. Like the world is like the universe, if you believe in a creator, is so beyond our just smallest understanding. Um, and then just work, just stay busy, was the guidance. And in a way, that was kind of a way of saying empowering humility is like, just don't get caught up with so many things we can't control. And you think about, our, the attention economy, it just feeds into that natural human desire to want to control things within our own paradigm. And a former pastor, I loved his guidance to me when I went through that difficult period was, well, I think it's a very good truth, is security is an illusion. But if you think about everything that's hitting us on Facebook all the time, saying, no, you can't be secure. Just take this one quick solution, read this one quick book, listen to this one quick person, go see. And you think about how we've elevated like mental health therapists and counselors.
Yeah.
If they're good, they're wonderful. But if they don't have humility, they can really just supercharge their own biases and your own trauma, and it's actually for their financial benefit to do so. Frank, just like Facebook and the other algorithms and social media that want to capture your attention, they don't want to let you go kind of like in a net. They
I
build
think
a
of
net where a spider, just in a fun little analogy maybe you can play off of. You think about it, the attention economy, be it mental health counselors, social media algorithms, they basically are building a net. They're the spider building a net off of your trauma, off your biases, off of your leanings for better or for worse, so they can capture you and eat off you, feed off you indefinitely.
yeah. I call in the business world, I call those people like gurus. They're just a guru that says they can 10x your business and they can do X and Y and all these amazing things. And, they just need 30 minutes of your time and you're going to get 1,000 leads and it's going to be free. I got this assessment, all that kind of stuff. And I am so allergic to some of that stuff because sometimes things are just hard, or sometimes they're unexpected. The security, estimating the future is so uncertain. We have no idea.
Yeah.
So a little bit of humility in that. We have no idea what the future is going to hold. But no, to your point about what you can control and that worry and that kind of self-inflicted pain. I think of Ryan Holiday, the Daily Stoic, if you're familiar.
Okay.
He's got a lot of content on. He's even got this like medallion you can buy, this little gold medallion. And on one side it says, basically like what you can control, what you can't control. And it's a reminder to lose that anxiety that we all have, that there's stuff out of your control. Just let it go. So anyway, it helps me humility in myself sometimes.
I wonder if we, in a future podcast to bring him on or bring him on with like Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, yeah. Ryan, he's down in Austin. It's not too far from me. So
Okay.
yeah. Anyway. So I want to be clear though. One thing that I think about with social media and all that, we all are on social media. I mean, you're on, I'm on, everybody's on social media. So it's not that social media per se is bad, right? It's just more of the ways that it can capture us if we're not careful. Is that fair to say the way that
Right,
you
right,
you
right.
would think about it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I
And
think that is a helpful thing because it's easy to just deride social media as like the worst thing ever, but it can be actually really a great thing if you're aware of what it can do to you. I think maybe that's a way to say it.
absolutely. And that's where like, we we feel that the technologies we want to build are to help people manage better their social media experience. And
Hmm.
that so one of the things that we're building, and actually we already have a partnership with a company called Minddoor, that they built this for astronauts and military folks that were going in tough places where like we can't send these great humans to do this great work if they have mental health concerns. So can we catch it early? And so it detects stress, problematic stress, before it gets the best of us. So and the other, and what they're helping us do is build the same thing for biases. So the use case is, wouldn't it be nice if you're on social media, but then you have an empowering humility plugin that you've allowed to monitor kind of your communication, and all of a sudden it gives you a little pop that says, "Hey, Brandon, you're statistically you're showing some signs and some language that you're showing some biases, and maybe even help point to the specific type of bias that your language is communicating." And so but we're not saying to not come off social media. We're just helping users have a safer experience by giving them better self-awareness, giving them indications of potentially malevolent influence. And that's kind of the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So we talked about some of the social media and things like that, but I want to go into what are the benefits of humility. So we're talking kind of, loosely. We've talked about some of the problems, and I think the problem is very evident for most people, that you don't have as much trust when people feel like when somebody's arrogant or there's a leader that is suffering from hubris. You can be defensive. There's resistance from each other if we feel like we're not welcome. And then, of course, all the different, anxieties and worries that come out of self-centeredness and all of that. In addition to things like what Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book, of the anxious generation, and suicide rates are up, especially for younger folks on social. So there's all of that, and I think a lot of people that are listening are pretty familiar. But I want to talk about some of the things that might be really great coming out of if you focus on humility as a practice, using technology in different ways, using, say, prayer or meditation or other spiritual practices. What have you seen in your life when you have developed humility, in addition to maybe some of the research that you and your team have found that that supports that if you can embrace humility in your life through different practices, you get, X and Y outcome. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. And also maybe double back on some kind of how we came to be empowering humility and why I'm involved. So, most people, so I think kind of the question is, and I encourage listeners, just think through what good do you enjoy where humility isn't part of it?
Hmm.
And I think when you start looking for where it has so much benefit, health, mental, relational, spiritual, it's really eye-opening. And so I'll give you some examples of where, like, asking myself that own question or having that revealed to me, I think was really like kind of an aha wow moment. Is when you think like the United States when it was founded, you could say it was founded on a desire for shared humility. In other words, we're not going to have one monarch dictate what we're doing. We're going to share humility. We're going to decentralize pride, if we want to, put it in this context, and create the most prosperous republic that the world's ever seen. Even though I'm actually in Italy right now, Venice did the same thing. And you think about kind of democratic or republic values and like our constitutional values, they are in effect a form of securing shared humility, that no one has all the answers and that we're so much greater when we share and collaborate together. And so that's like at a collective societal level. Also at an individual level, the when I'm a person of faith, and I had a kindergarten teacher, Brandon, that when I graduated high school, so 12 years later, came up to me at graduation and told me that they've been praying for me every day since kindergarten.
Wow.
Yeah, and I thought that's just amazing. Anyhow, and I've been around other people who've been faithful people of prayer, and I've always admired them. There was just a humility about them that I admired. And so anyhow, I built an app just to journal my prayers, because I just handwritten them. It was a very simple, nothing fancy. And as I, in parallel, started helping with some innovation cultivation circles, specifically in defense, it kind of hit me that all of this beautiful defense innovation, all these amazing entrepreneurs, all this great work, like if we don't restore humility back to society as like a core foundation, a shared value, it's really all for naught, because this great technology is going to end up in the hands of the next, you think of also the worst people we know in history. They got absolutely consumed by their pride, their hubris. So in this whole process of joining the defense innovation community, having built this prayer app, it kind of hit me that, actually the act of prayer, regardless of faith, frankly, the act of reflection, the act of asking questions, when you share prayer, you're effectively asking a question to someone else. You're sharing a question with someone else. You're sharing a concern. You're sharing an insecurity. That the act of prayer is an act of humility. So, anyhow, and if you look at the statistic behind people who faithfully pray, like they're even like lower mortality risk, because basically our body when we're stressed. You think about how stress affects our bodies. It creates inflammation that
Hmm.
leads other physiological problems. Um, I love Dr. Brad Owens. He's done a study on how humility helps leadership performance and also organizational performance. But what I really love about his study is we all know the person that was like the straight A student who never studied, right? That wasn't me. Uh, he's done the studies that said those who are more humble can arrive at the same mental ability as, let's say, that straight A person who never studied.
Hmm.
So the benefits are huge, and anyhow, that's our quest with empowering humility, is to help those who want, individuals, companies, organizations, to empower humility in their ranks and to bring these benefits to society.
I love how you talked about two things. One is the idea of creating humility in a systemic way, like creating a system that makes that a lot, I guess, more difficult to see or to create in a system. So you talked about like the Republic of America and the founding fathers, and the way that they designed our system is a way to root out that kind of totalitarian regime that can always crop up and always has cropped up, whether it's a king or a dictator or just
Yeah.
a very important person in your community.
Or just look at Enron, right? The groupthink that happened there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We all know cases of toxic leadership. What's the root? Is a crazy level of hubris.
And it's a human thing. I mean, we
Yeah.
all since the days of old, we are almost like driven to be this like the center of the universe, and so it's
Yep.
so natural, and you have to fight against that natural position. And so, creating systems using technology, creating ways to create maybe some objectivity around your world. But I'm curious. You mentioned prayer, and maybe we can end on this. But are there other kinds of tips that you've seen, maybe aside from technology or the different things that you've seen in your own life or in your research that your team is conducting that your average person can take away and try to practice humility in a more deep and abiding way? Is there things like that that come to mind that you've
Sure,
practiced over the
sure.
years?
I think the just journaling questions and kind of, and we want to appeal to people with faith and without, because I don't think you can even have a true faith without humility.
Amen.
So journaling those questions, call it what you want. You call those your prayers, right? Gratitude is also really is probably a great litmus test for your degree of humility, because the, and I think everyone quotes Einstein. Someone can call me on if it's wrong, but I believe he wrote, um, the more you want to know, the more you have to admit you don't know.
Mm.
Like really embrace that paradox, dive into it, and it's really fun. I really think that that's in Maslow's hierarchy. If we wanted to make a hierarchy in that self-actualization, I think humility is where you start at the bottom of that tip self-actualization and go to the top, because it's it's really cool. You all of a sudden you start looking like at an itty bitty little flower. You start looking at it from all the different angles, and you go, "Oh my goodness, I missed that." And then with human relationships too, when you're so like not concerned with your maybe Maslow's bottom hierarchy of needs, you can really appreciate who the other human being is, despite all those things you may really not like. So I think journaling, just writing in any form, and reviewing and reflecting on those, and watching how you find peace over time with some of these questions. You know.
I love that. I love that. Well, as we wrap up this first episode, is there any parting thoughts or closing thoughts that you want to make sure that our listeners understand, or can take to heart before we get into some of the other topics that we want to get into in subsequent episodes?
Brandon, thanks. I'm new to this podcast world, so I think just want to encourage listeners. We're trying to make a verb out of let's humble. I guess, yeah. Like put that into action. So I make bets with friends. So how about this? Because I can't bet to every listener, make this bet, but I can bet it with you.
Okay.
Brandon, if anyone calls you up saying, "Hey, humility did not help me feel better," I owe you lunch. Okay.
I'll take you up on that. In Italy. It better be in Italy too.
In Italy. Okay. I'll do that. So if you want to send Brandon to Italy, then for lunch, tell him that that humility is not helping you have a better work and personal life.
I love that. That's great. I will try to put it into practice, and I'll take you up on that bet. I need it. You mentioned stress and all that earlier. It's just like, man, yeah, so much stress is so easy to get into your life, and it is so damaging. So I could take some of these tips and probably be a little healthier. Giancarlo, thank you so much for your time for this episode. I can't wait to talk to you in episode 2. We are going to be talking about politics because we have an upcoming election and humility is not one of the campaign promises. So we need to talk about that. So we will see you again in episode 2.
Thanks, Brandon.